Hey everybody, this is Mark Smith, the host of Digital Roughneck. I'm here with Craig O'Neill, who is the Director of Business Development for OGI for FLIR. Welcome, Craig.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you having me on here today.
So, full disclosure, Craig and I have been working together for quite some time, ever since really the birth of CleanConnect.ai, our company, where we use actually a FLIR G300A, which is a cooled core camera similar to the handheld that's the standard in the industry, the GF320. And we use that to continuously monitor client sites for leaks. And we've also been working together on comments to the new EPA Quado B and C regulations, which I've covered in a previous episode, and Appendix K, which is a brand new thing I covered in a previous episode. If you haven't seen those, you should definitely go watch those, and I'll have links to those episodes below. So in part, Appendix K now really, I call it, canonizes OGI. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but it is the benchmark by which all leak detection is done as far as EPA is concerned, and pretty much every other state as well.
Yeah, it's something that's been worked on for a while, but putting it onto paper, it's pretty expansive as far as how Appendix K was written with this new proposed rule by the EPA. But it highlights how effective and efficient optical gas imaging is at finding leaks, being able to do it in a short amount of time, being able to know what's happening with those leaks. And that's always been, one of the challenges that we see with other technologies in the industry is there's a lot of technologies that can detect an emission. They can detect that there is a leak. But what I like to say is they don't have the situational awareness for the operator to understand what is actually happening with that leak. And so, Appendix K helps highlight that and highlights that optical gas imaging as the best system of emissions reduction for the EPA. But, when you step away from that, whether it's Appendix K, whether it's, the ESG metrics that a lot of these organizations are trying to hit, optical gas imaging has that unique ability to provide them situational awareness to know actually what's happening, not just that something is happening.
Right. And that's been a key thing, I think, with our clients who may have tried other technology that said, hey, a leak went off, but then they have to send in, the LDAR crew to go verify, to go find out, well, what is happening, right? And then, if there's a big lag between, let's say, when a sensor went off and when they send an LDAR crew, they may not find it, or maybe something else. Or I think one of the probably common scenarios you see is normal operations versus fugitive, or I guess EPA calls them venting versus fugitive. Or you even had another term that we were talking about ahead of time.
Yeah, when you run into what you might define as a vent versus a leak. A vent is an operational emission, right? It's an ability for the way that an operation is working to actually have to emit a leak or have an emission to operate safely. Whereas a leak is a leak. A leak is something that's unintended, it's unexpected. So when you look at operational emissions, those may be intermittent leaks, things that happen just daily, and it's very challenging for other technologies to either catch intermittent emissions whenever they're not there, or to catch an intermittent emission whenever it's supposed to happen and not know that it's not a leak, and not know what exactly it is. So yeah, from that, situational awareness of understanding what's happening on site to being able to define a normal event versus a nuisance event. I've heard some people define the emission aspect versus leaks also as a nuisance event of what's happening there.
Right. And so we've got clients who are trying to get gold, or actually have achieved gold certification on OGMP 2.0, which is Oil and Gas Methane Partnership, which means that they had to be able to identify, emissions from the site level to the source level as well. And that's a key thing. When we're talking about situational awareness, it's one thing to say, hey, there's a leak somewhere versus separator number 3, right? That specific thing, so that now I can remotely diagnose that problem and possibly remotely fix it. So I don't even need to put a guy in a truck and go out there anymore. I can see, oh, that's the problem. Hey, let's, reboot the combustor, reboot this or whatever, and fix it remotely. And then to be able to visually see, oh, it's working again. Everything's good, right?
Yeah, so it's you've got two different ways to look at optical gas imaging in the confine of in a well pad as an example. Often, and as people think of it, it's the LDAR aspect. It's the leak detection and repair. A guy with a camera in his hand that goes out there, and it's hard to replace that. But with efforts in the industry like Clean Connect to be able to try to get as close as you can to mimicking a continuous operation with a with the handheld. As you mentioned, there are other technologies through the alternative screening technologies in the Quado ABC that's recently out. All of those technologies don't do a whole lot of change. They go from a quarterly to a bi-monthly, but they do still require an optical gas imaging camera on an annual basis. If you have an optical gas imaging camera on site 24/7 that has the same detector, the same technology, and it doesn't reduce that detection threshold, you really have a unique answer to the industry's problem that is also understood, and that may even require less of the handheld truck roll person because you have that situational awareness to be able to just look at a video and not see a single snapshot from let's say an aerial inspection that just says something is happening on the ground and there's methane present. It's really unique to be able to have a look in, whether it's handheld or have that look in through a continuous operated optical gas imaging camera.
And I think too, because we were, doing continuous using, your OGI camera, you guys provided a great business model for us as well, as a service. So no upfront CapEx. I think that's the biggest fear. People think, what, OGI? Like, how can I put that on every site? But with this as a service, we can hit the ground running. It's there 24/7, and it produces a lot of data, which a lot of our clients who have ESG bonuses tied to their pay. Literally, I got C-level people telling me all the time, listen, I have a bonus tied to hitting my greenhouse gas reduction limits. I made a commitment to my shareholders. I'm going to be net zero by 2030 or whatever. So now they're forcing me, I need to prove that I'm hitting those numbers. So all this data that we're cranking out down to the equipment level, the site level, time stamped, quantifying, showing all that stuff where we can prove that. I think the whole ESG thing, and you've written articles about ESG and the correlation between OGI cameras and ESG even.
Yeah, so we have we'll provide the link on the Digital Roughneck site. But we actually have a paper that I co-wrote with an author out of Canada who is an actual owner of an LDAR service technician company. And what we start to see as we interview people and talk and dig into this is you've got to convince people that you are committed. There's a lot of statements about ESG or about emissions mitigation metrics. But there's not a lot of way to hold people accountable to their statements. And I often talk, and it may be in this paper or not, but talk about how does the boardroom talk match the boots on the ground, right? Do the people that are actually out there doing the work, are they actually doing the same thing that a CEO? And so one thing that optical gas imaging does, it allows the capabilities to prove that you're doing this. It's a lot of industries where you've got to convince people, the jeweling industry, you got to convince people that you're actually getting conflict-free diamonds, as an example. Well, if you have visual representation, if you have visual evidence that you're reducing emissions and showing people how you're doing it, which is what optical gas imaging does, and at the same time, be able to take that next level of not only reduce it, but understand what's happening at your operations. Is it a leak? Is it a vent? Is it a nuisance event? Is it an intermittent leak? Again, they are really, really understanding of what's happening, because the ESG industry, the people that do this now, regulatory wise, there may be a difference between a leak and a vent. To the ESG people, it doesn't matter. A leak for event, it's an emission, and they see it as such. So yeah, there's a paper on there that on how optical gas imaging helps support that low carbon and economy or an ESG metrics within organizations. That we feel as though it's a really good kind of basic paper to help understand that.
Well, and we're also going to take that to the next level in an upcoming online summit that we're doing together called ESG for Energy. And we have a link below for that as well. It's free to sign up, but we're going to go into detail with a specific, what I call the M4 framework. We're going to show you how to put together a super practical ESG strategy that you can implement now. That includes everything that Craig talked about, situational awareness, all that data that we crank out using FLIR and our AI, as well as pushing that all the way down to, be able to prove your methane intensity. So anyway, really both Craig and I would love to see you live on that ESG for Energy on, coming up March 17th. So anyway, thanks again, Craig, for being here and talking about one of your favorite subjects, situational awareness. And thanks for being such a great partner for Clean Connect. Honestly, we could not have done and gotten as far as we have without FLIR's help. So
yeah, Mark, I appreciate your time here on this podcast and allowing me to talk about the things that mean a lot to myself and to Teledyne-FLIR. So appreciate it and look forward to seeing you and everybody else here in a couple of weeks at the ESG for Energy virtual event.